I recently embarked on a major road trip across the western United States and Canada, visiting some of the West's most incredible national parks as well as some spooky ghost towns along the way, all while living out of my car, making for a very busy but amazing 2.5-week trip. This trip was long and had many crazy things happen along the way, from decaying ghost towns to literal world-class scenery like Glacier and Waterton National Parks. I also captured beautiful drone footage of some of the most off-the-beat places in the lower 48, so I encourage you to sit back and enjoy the ride. I spent my first day driving through Utah on the way to visit some friends near Salt Lake City, beginning the journey from Durango, Colorado. Along the way, I got to spend a few hours in Arches National Park, which because of my limited time span, I mostly just did the driving tour, although I did stop to do the Double Arch and Windows Arch trails, both of which are short, crowded, and yield awesome viewpoints of some of the best natural bridges in all of Utah. Also, if you're enjoying, please make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video, and to help me hit 300 subscribers. I greatly appreciate it. I finished off the day by going to the Delicate Arch Overlook and getting some stunning photos of a Union Pacific freight train just outside of Moab, before finally making it to my friend's house at the dead of night. My friend showed me around his hometown a bit before we decided to visit the nearby Promontory Point, which was the meeting point for the Central Pacific and Union Pacific in their quest to construct the Transcontinental Railroad. The site has been turned into a National Historic Park, and they have two beautiful reconstructed operating steam locomotives that are used for various demonstrations, and you can get some amazing shots of them operating in the Utah prairies. So my friend actually had a couple days off of work, so he decided to come with me to visit some of the mines I had planned to visit in Idaho. Our first stop on the trip was the town of Mackay, which was founded in 1901 and served as a major mining and railroad hub for many decades. Today, its economy is primarily focused on agriculture and farming, but if you head into the mountains, there's dozens of incredible abandoned mine remains to be discovered, including the massive Mackay Mine, of which its largest remains are an old tram station. This mine features stunning mountains off in the distance, as well as numerous other abandoned mine remains nearby. There's a lot of tram towers hidden inside of the trees, as well as a massive compression plant at the beginning of the trail. We also wandered off into the woods near the Alberta Tunnel Mine and discovered the remains of a railroad trestle hidden deep in the middle of nowhere, with the whistles of railroad past having long since faded into history. To my surprise, my Honda CR-V was actually able to handle most of the road, with the exception of the last part to the tram house. The next day, we traveled further into Idaho to visit some of the state's well-known lakes inside the Sawtooth Mountain Range. But when we arrived at our destination, we were greeted by an unexpected thunderstorm, which forced us to shelter inside of the car for a bit before we could explore. But once we got hiking, the numerous lakes we passed by were absolutely stunning, made all the better by the gorgeous mossy trees. Now, I've been on a lot of car camping trips all over America, and on trips, as I'm sure most of you know, you can't expect everything to go 100% according to plan, and unfortunately, along the trail to our destination, at one point we had to cross this fairly small but raging river, and the only way across was to walk over a log, and it would be at this point that I fell off into the water while carrying my backup camera and drone in my pocket. Because of how much I carry with me, I didn't really have room to put either of them in my backpack, although thankfully I personally escaped unharmed, which was kind of a consolation prize. Needless to say, this kind of derailed the day, and with the storm showing no signs of letting up, we just decided to stop at Farley Lake, which, while not our planned destination, turned out to be absolutely incredible as well. Thursday would be a long day filled with multiple ghost towns and mines all over the place. We spent the first part of the day checking out some of Idaho's famous rivers and then proceeded to head up Yankee Fork Road, which is about an hour from the Sawtooth Mountain. Up this road are the ghost towns of Bonanza and Custer City, as well as the Yankee Fork Railing Dredge, an incredible piece of 1900s era mining equipment that would traverse rivers to dig up and strip the earth of all of its minerals. We actually got to do a full tour of the dredge and see its inner workings, so if you're in the area, I highly recommend. Bonanza and Custer City both have substantial structural remains, with the latter having been largely restored to its former state as a museum. While the two towns were founded at about the same time, it wouldn't take long for Bonanza to fade into irrelevance, while Custer City would become a major boomtown, with the General Custer Mill processing the millions of dollars worth of ores that came out of the town. Like most other mining towns of its era, Custer City was a boomtown, and just like every other boomtown, its mines would run dry mostly by the 1910s and was abandoned soon afterwards. Today it makes for an incredible stop with dozens of well-preserved buildings and exhibits like the old schoolhouse for you to explore. We still had one more ghost town to see before ending off the day, which was called Bayhorse, which we would have to drive over an hour to get to in the evening, but I will say that it was well worth the extra drive time. With the first settlers arriving in 1864, Bayhorse wouldn't boom until 1872 when prospectors located the Beardsley mine. Over the next few decades, the town's population would blossom to over 300 people, with dozens of stores and cabins springing up, including a gigantic mill in the center of town. The mines of Bayhorse would begin to shutter in 1888, with the town being abandoned for good in 1915. There's numerous well-preserved buildings, including the massive Gilmer and Salisbury stamp mill. After we left Bayhorse, my friend had to begin driving back to Utah to go to work the next day, so we said our goodbyes and I continued on my journey. I decided to continue on my way into Montana and go to the ghost town of Bannack, which was basically on my way. This town, built in 1862, was at one point the capital of the Montana Territory for a few months, and it would have a peak population of 10,000 people, becoming the largest settlement in the area. The town had hundreds of cabins and dozens of businesses, and today it is remarkably well preserved. Among the best surviving buildings are the old schoolhouse and hotel, both of which you can walk around inside and marvel at 1860s Victorian charm. Now began the part of the trip that I came to Montana for. I began driving to Glacier National Park on Sunday night, and even from just outside of Missoula, you can still see just how massive the glaciers are. When I woke up with a few hours to kill, I explored the massive Hungry Horse Reservoir, as well as a couple of other lakes in West Glacier before finally getting to enter the park. The first thing I did upon entering Glacier was checking out the stunning Lake McDonald, a massive 10-mile long lake that features stunning views of the mountains off in the distance. From there, I began driving up the Going to the Sun Road, and even though it only takes about 2 hours from start to finish, I ended up taking nearly 6 hours to finish the drive because I simply couldn't resist stopping at every single lookout point possible. Going to the Sun is one of the most incredible drives in North America and frankly the entire world. None of the clips that I put on screen will be able to fully convey just how massive the glaciers are. You literally just have to be there to see it for yourself. My personal favorite stops along the drive were at Logan Pass, which yields insane views as well as a lot of bighorn sheep. I also really enjoyed stopping at Red Rock Point, where you can hike for a bit alongside the Flathead River, as well as the St. Mary's Falls overlook, which gives you a view of St. Mary Lake, one of the park's most famous and photographed spots. On day 2 of the glacier trip, I got up early early and drove back to Logan Pass so I could hike to Hidden Lake, which normally is supposed to be a short trail. However, this was actually the first day that it was open, and there was still a lot of snow that turned an hour-and-a-half trail into almost a 3-hour round trip. After this trail, I did a quick hike to the top of Lunch Creek, which had multiple waterfalls grouped together in a majestic basin with stunning views facing towards the road. For my third and final hike that day, I did the full St. Mary's Falls Loop Trail, which takes you to not only St. Mary's Falls, but also Bering Falls and the massive Virginia Falls. The loop also provides you with stunning views of the lake and glaciers surrounding it. I spent the night car camping just outside of East Glacier near a railroad, and the next morning I got to photograph a train going over one of the most incredible trestles in the entire West before heading into the Two Medicine area of Glacier, which is one of the least crowded portions of the park, but is absolutely just as gorgeous as the main portion. I decided to hike to Upper Two Medicine Lake from the North Shore Trailhead. This hike gives you some awesome views of the middle Two Medicine Lake. If all I did was just hike this shoreline, it would have been well worth it. Now, unfortunately, when I looked at the weather forecast, I noticed a series of bad weather coming to the area within the next couple of days, so I decided to accelerate my plans and drive to Waterton National Park in Canada, which is located right along the border with Montana and is actually part of an international peace park between the US and Canada. I only got to spend a single day in Waterton, but it was a genuinely stunning place that, while substantially smaller than Glacier, has a lot to offer and explore. I personally hiked to the top of Bear's Hump, a short hike that takes you to an overlook of the town and incredible view of the lakes. Afterwards, I took a drive along the Akamina Parkway to Cameron Lake, a stunning body of water that happens to sit in both America and Canada. The shoreline hike here was stunning, and I couldn't really recommend it much more. While I had originally been planning on spending the next day hiking in Waterton, a rare summer snowstorm threatened to shut down the roads, and thus I retreated back across the border into America. While the weather wasn't nearly as bad in Glacier as in Waterton, a bit of rain was coming later in the day, so I went to check out the Trail of the Cedars and Avalanche Lake, which is one of the most stunning and easiest hikes to do in the entire park, and understandably the most crowded. Even though it's pretty short and relatively easy, the Avalanche Lake / Cedars Trail is one of the most incredible hikes I've ever done. The densely packed trees with all of the moss on them, along with the river, makes this such a gorgeous rainforest that it's honestly incredible that these places actually exist inside the United States. And with mountains surrounding it on all sides, I'm honestly at a loss of words on how to describe Avalanche Lake, especially with the 4 different waterfalls streaming down the mountainside. Now, unfortunately, while heading to the lake, we started getting drenched in rain, and this would continue for the rest of the time that we were there. I discovered that it was going to snow the next day and close off part of the park, so I decided to leave and begin making my way back home, although I still had a few more stops to make before being done for good. As it turned out, most of western Montana was bracing for that same rare summer snowstorm, so I had to bypass most of the ghost towns I had hoped to see to begin heading back towards Utah. Nevertheless, I spent one last day in Montana visiting the ghost town of Granite, a well-preserved 1870s era ghost town that has dozens of old structural remains, including a massive old mine site which features the extensive foundations of the mill along the hillside, with some old buildings still standing by just a thread, such as a cabin, multiple ore bins, an explosives house, among many others. I also got to check out the old hotel and various other foundations hidden in the forest. The weather was absolutely horrendous, and I spent pretty much the whole day getting rained on. Nevertheless, I thoroughly enjoyed exploring Granite, and on the way out, I found a bunch of tram towers hidden in the trees. The next day, I drove to a small town in Wyoming called Evanston, which is an old western railroad town. I got to explore explore the awesome downtown, which feels right out of the 1890s and has an incredible Veterans Memorial and World War I era soldier statue. There's also a massive roundhouse where all the trains used to be housed, along with some supporting buildings like a machine shop, as well as a bunch of old trains sitting in the yard on display, making it a rail fan's heaven. There's also a nearby ghost town called Piedmont, which I visited, featuring numerous charcoal kilns and dilapidated wooden structures which somehow haven't collapsed under the weight of Wyoming's insane storm. After this, I began driving back to my friend's house in Utah, and along the way, I had the very rare privilege of seeing a Union Pacific Heritage Unit for the defunct Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad. The next day, my friend and I went to check out a gigantic abandoned mill right outside of Park City called the Silver King Mill, which was built around the 1890s and actually stayed in operation until the early 1950s. And today, the mill is relatively well preserved aside from the constant graffiti, with a ton of rare equipment across every single floor inside of the building. There were also a few other remains in the area to explore, as well as a few aerial tram towers that once serviced the numerous mines of Park City and some great valley overlooks. The next day would be my final day of the trip, and we went to the Ogden Union Station, which has free museums built into the station, showcasing some of the oldest cars, rifles, and trains all in one historic station. They have multiple historic, hard-to-find locomotives, such as Union Pacific's 833, and was one of the last steam locomotives to haul freight on the Union Pacific line, retiring in 1957. I also found the remains of DNRGW locomotive number 223, which was special to me because a few years ago, I had actually donated to an effort to preserve the locomotive, which unfortunately was not to be. And with this last stop, I had to begin making the drive back to Colorado, thus bringing my trip to an end. I hope that you enjoyed listening to my adventures as much as I enjoyed going on them. If you did, please make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new travel video or ghost town exploration. Also, leave a comment letting me know your thoughts while at it. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all in the next one.